Hey everyone, I'm Marc Saltzman here at the FCPC event. This has been a lot of fun, and I want to introduce Susan Irving. She is the Senior Director for Marketing at PepsiCo Canada. Thanks for joining us. We unfortunately didn't have time to do our fireside chat on stage because of just time limitations. There was a lot of speakers today, and your talk was amazing, showing us examples from Gatorade to Lay's to Doritos to Quaker, showing us how PepsiCo embraces digital and to create a memorable, impactful, and meaningful campaign for Canadians, and some of them used around the world as well. So thanks for your time. This is just going to be sort of a condensed version of what we were going to do on stage. I guess my first question is, for those who are marketing to digital, should the creative cater to that platform, or can you repurpose a lot of the traditional assets you may use? Like, do us a flavor, I should say. Yeah. You could have had a 30-minute spot on TV and that's it. Send it, go to this website. But how did it? It was an interactive campaign. So what differentiates a creative marketing campaign for digital versus traditional?
Great question.
It took a long time for me to ask it, but I'm glad you liked it.
It's a great question. I think when it comes to any marketing campaign, you got to go back to what your objectives are, right? Because at the end of the day, when I evaluate creative, yes, it's fun to make great creative, but if it's not moving product or hitting your objectives, you want to make sure that you have something that engages a consumer, but also delivers on sales targets as well. If you look at Do Us a Flavor, it's just like any campaign. If you just have one medium, you're only going to reach a certain amount of consumers, and then all of a sudden you're going to have high frequency. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing of, if you want higher reach, you need television, you need digital and PR. As you continue to add the different vehicles, you're going to get more reach.
Sure. But not everybody can afford a big, ambitious
absolutely.
Super Bowl ad for the Doritos, right? PepsiCo can, but not a lot of even the folks watching today can.
Absolutely not. And that's the thing. Whether it's a small campaign or a big campaign, you got to think about the role of digital and the role of television. Television is typically to drive equity, to drive mass awareness of something, whereas digital, it's a little bit more personable. And it's a two-way conversation. But on top of that, you can rely on your consumers to share for you. So you don't have to worry about what your budget is. And that's what's so great about digital, is that you can front load your plan. If you're going to do a viral video or something, you front load your plan, and then you get consumers to share it for you. Sure. To drive that reach. So you don't have to worry about what your budget is or your constraints. Another example is Doritos ketchup. Small campaign, we did not have a lot of money for that campaign. It was minimal dollars, but what we did was, we had a great idea and we relied on consumers to share it. Because at the end of the day, if you have a big budget and a bad idea, that's not good. You're better off having a great idea and a limited budget.
Sure. So by and I said this in my talk as well, if you do a really good job in the packaged goods world, then your consumers become ambassadors because they love it so much, and it's, as you said, it's a personal attachment to that brand. And then they start sharing it, which you can't do with TV. Right. So I get that. So it's more broad strokes, but it's not as measurable and it's not as shareable. So I guess there's pros and cons with each approach. What do you think the number one mistake is that companies are doing when it comes to drafting and executing a creative campaign for digital? Is there one mistake that people keep tripping up on?
I think the biggest mistake is not being scientific, right? So with digital, you can be a lot more analytical, right? Mm-hmm. Television, it's a mass message.
Just throw it out there.
Just throw it out there. But when it comes to digital, it is so targeted, right? And there's so many different ways that you can do things. For instance, let's say you work for a pet food company. I don't have pets. I'm allergic. I'm never going to have a pet. Mm-hmm. So serving me a pet food ad is not a great idea. So the power with digital is you can get so targeted to the consumer that you want to go to, that you really need to use digital and analytics. Get the creative, but you need to be scientific and really rely on your media company to make sure that you're actually serving the ad to the right person. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing that consumers or marketers really need to think about, is making sure I'm not just doing creative, but leveraging the media mix and data, and be scientific about who you're serving that ad to.
And the platforms like Facebook, for example, would know they're a dog owner, they're not, they're a cat owner.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the power of digital.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too that people are making mistakes on is they think that digital is a viral video.
How many times has a CEO of a company said to their marketing team, their CMO, whatever, make us a viral hit, and then probably they want to pull their hair out because it's easier said than done.
But it's easier said than done, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. But the other thing you have to realize is, as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram change their algorithms all the time, you need to put money behind those things that you do. So I think the other mistake that consumer marketers are making is that they think they need to feed content all the time. You don't have to feed content all the time, but what you need to make sure is that if you are going to put something out there, make sure it drives your brand positioning, make sure it's thumb stopping. Because the other big thing that I find that people are doing is, back in the day when you evaluated a television ad, you'd watch it on a big screen. Well, that's not how consumers are looking at things now.
Right.
It's on a tiny screen. So
Right.
what you need to make sure of when you go to your advertising agency, sit and look at it with no sound as well. Because when a consumer first sees your ad served up on Facebook, let's say, it's gonna take 7 seconds. You only have 7 seconds to get them to actually press on it. So make sure those 7 seconds are listened without sound. And do you think a consumer is actually gonna press on your ad?
No, that's interesting. That's right. Yeah, with the Facebook video roll, it doesn't start playing until you put your mouse or you tap it.
Right.
Now, with digital, you can also be nimble. So you gave us the example of with the Doritos Smash the Super Bowl?
Crash the Super Bowl.
Crash, I know, something like that. Thank you. That you noticed, and it was almost like a tongue-in-cheek retroactive campaign where you said, all right, we didn't have a video that had a dog or a dad in it, so here's one that we cooked up for you. So I thought that was great. But obviously, you have to have the resources to turn something around like that, or that now famous Oreos example on Twitter, right? When there was the blackout, and they were able to get their creative, like
For
that's
dunking in the dark.
That's right, dunking in the dark. So these are now, in the textbooks, if there are textbooks anymore, for marketing and creative schools, because you were able to capitalize on something and turn it around so quickly. How easy or difficult is that to pivot so fast in the digital age?
You need to collaborate, is what it is, right? If you think about it, when you are approving creative, your French translation needs to see it, your legal needs to see it, your PR agency needs to see it, right? There's so many different approvals. But what you typically do, let's say at the Super Bowl, or when you have big events where you need to get content out because things are happening, you need to have either a room or a group of people that are ready to approve things right away. So it's shifting how we're working, right? And mobility and phones and emails are allowing you to be able to do that. But you need to change how you think. The other thing you have to think about is when you shoot a television commercial, it takes months. You brief a big agency, it takes about 6 months to get something on air. With digital, you need to make sure that you're nimble, right? You need to not worry about things. It's not going to be perfect, so you're going to have to take a little bit more risks. So I encourage you to be a little bit more of a risk taker, because some things aren't going to be great, but you've got to make sure that you're in a company that you can get legal approval, PR approval, and make decisions on the fly.
Okay, good tips, good advice there. In 2 out of the 4 examples that you showed us on stage today, they pulled on the emotional heartstrings. So the Gatorade hockey ad, and then there was the Quaker dad and daughter spot. I think that today's consumer is a more savvy one, and they may smell that, okay, they're obviously trying to milk us on an emotional connection. How do you straddle that line between going there, where you feel like you can make a connection with the consumer, but you don't want it to come off as unauthentic?
I think you need to make sure, first of all, it has to be authentic. If you don't think it's coming through as authentic, then you've got a problem. I think if you notice in the Gatorade example, as well as in the Quaker recital, there was not a lot of product in there. So it was limited use of the product, because it was really standing for a higher ground and a higher meaning. You can then use different other ways to show your product in smaller digital snips.
Out of all your campaigns that you've been part of, or that you showed us today on stage, what's your favorite and why?
Oh, that's a hard one.
For me, it's do us a flavor. I keep saying do me a flavor. Do us a flavor. I'm a chipaholic. Maybe that's what it is. But I love the personalization, because like you said, when there's a table full of people, everybody's going to have their own flavor. They're going to debate about it. So I think I like that one the most, because I think it's the one that I can identify with, and it's a lot more universal, I think, than like you were saying, a pet product, because it's not going to appeal to everybody. Everybody eats chips.
I mean, Do Us a Flavor is a great, it's our running campaign, and it ties to that consumer insight of everyone has a chip idea. I love that one, but I have to say one of my favorites right now is Doritos ketchup, and the reason why is it was a limited budget, but it was a true insight, the fact that consumers would do anything to get ketchup chips back. So the holdout, it's won over 10 industry awards already.
Oh, that's great.
It's up for Cassie's this month as well. But the team did such a good idea with a limited budget, coming up with an idea that delivers on the chips and the consumer need, and then something with mobile phones that consumers had to do. So I'd say that one's one of my favorites.
All right, and that leads me to my last question, which is, I know you can't talk about what's next behind the scenes at PepsiCo when it comes to marketing, but knowing mobile is the big thing now. This is how we're consuming media. You're able to leverage that in that Dorito spot. So what is next, do you think, for the industry as a whole when it comes to online or creative marketing for digital?
I think one of the biggest ones is data. Is about being a scientist and really understanding your data so that you can actually serve the proper ad, as I was talking about in terms of pet food. The other one I think is in terms of content. It's not about tons of content anymore. It's about thumb-stopping content. So I think consumers, marketers are really going to have to think about that. And then I think it's also video. Video's on the rise right now. There's more video going through Facebook than YouTube, they're saying. So I think it's also thinking about the size of video that you put on there, right? And thinking about the different ways that you can drive consumer engagement.
Great. Thank you very much, Susan Irving. Pleasure chatting with you, and all the best at PepsiCo. Thanks for watching this FCPC video. I'm Marc Saltzman. See you next time.